Welcome to Anecdotes for Success with Matt and Paul. Storytelling is an art form, emphasizing the value and learning that is created through personal experience. Our purpose is to share these stories and experiences with the listener. Everyone has a powerful testimony. Let's use them to level up to our best life with truth, meaning, trade-offs, and perspective.
Big shout out to Isaac Mather for the new podcast intro. You can check Isaac's music out on all socials or directly at isaacmathermusic.com. I am so sorry. Our executive assistant was off today. So
I just got notification that there's a recording in progress. So if y'all are recording me, you may want to, just a heads up, you might be getting recorded right now.
No. So we're getting braver now, Tom. We don't even do introductions now. We just
get
go
right after it.
Good for you, man.
If we don't, well, last week with our guest, I knew him from Twitter. We didn't know him, but we started having such a good conversation. We left the first 10 minutes in. We're just like, you know what? It's people have been saying we're having nice convos. Why would we cut that out? You know,
that's right.
Start with the introduction, but
I love it.
This is, I surprised Matt. This is your trifecta time, season 4, your episode 110.
Tom, it's great to see you again.
Good to see you, buddy.
I see you're still standing, literally standing. I love that.
It's like we never left each other. I'm in the same spot I was last time you saw me.
Now it's funny. We talked a little while back. It's funny when you start a podcast. I mean, we've had discussions lately about newer equipment and better software, but whatever. That will happen over time. But we thought, you throw it out there and you go national, and all of a sudden you're this household name. But I was at a basketball game at Elmira. The other day, Elmira played Edison for the Open for Hopes game. I had 3 people come up to me and say they love the podcast. Like, that's people great. You'd never guess. And so it's I didn't even tell you that yet. And so funny thing is, it's impacting locally or regionally, even though some of the guests come from all over. It's fun. Sure. So we don't have any plans except keep talking to people.
Let's just keep talking to people. I listen to every one of them. I bet you I've listened to at least 90% of them. I bet I have.
Okay. Wonderful.
Over time.
That's great.
Man.
I hope you listen to this one.
You know what? I don't know if I will.
Well, he'll be in the moment anyway.
I don't know if I will. In fact, somebody asked me the other day. I told them I was jumping on this thing for the 3rd time, and they said, "Yeah, the first 2 were great," and they kept talking about some things that we talked about, and I told them I didn't listen to them. I can't listen to myself on a podcast, man. I just can't do it.
I struggle.
So I in another life, I used to do a lot of interviews, both radio and TV, and in a different different career, and I made it an absolute rule to never ever listen. I just couldn't. It just I couldn't stand it. I don't know. There's something about it. Just I'm like, ugh, it just was not. I don't think I ever listened to anyone. I've been on. I'd have to say, when I say hundreds, like not 800, but maybe 200. Plenty where I had an opportunity to listen. I don't know. I'm like you. It's just not me.
I think part of it is we're our biggest critic, right?
Yeah,
I probably
100%.
wouldn't get 10 minutes into the podcast and I'd find 100 things I did wrong, and I'd get so damn frustrated that I just
I might not go back, right?
And never go back.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's not because to clarify, it's not because I think I'm just so perfect I don't need to listen to improve. It's because I'm afraid I just tear myself apart.
No, but it's funny. So I think we don't like listening to ourselves because it's a sign that you're not supposed to listen to yourself. You're supposed to listen to other people. So they make your voice seem cringy. But once in a while on my morning walk, run combo thing I do after Patrick Bet David or Rogan or whoever, there's some other ones I like. One of ours will automatically populate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I listened to it for a little bit. And recently I found myself, I can't believe it. I find myself saying like
Uh,
right there.
Like
Because,
right there.
well, and instead of, I was just getting, so you'd like this, Tom, when we do presentations in class now, they're not allowed many words on their PowerPoints at all. And instead of critiquing him afterwards, I call a timeout and we go have a meeting in the hallway like an athletic event. Like, I'm going to correct you right now.
That
And
is great. That's
I
great.
just the class laughs now. One kid yelled one time, "They need a timeout." Timeout.
You know what's funny? I've done Toastmasters a couple of times. You know that.
Yeah.
I'm big into that public speaking type stuff. We call them your kryptonite words. My kryptonite word is so. Now, every time I say so, your alarm's going to go off.
Okay.
Now that I've said that, but that's my kryptonite word. I think that's part of the reason that I don't like listening to myself back, because I kind of know what my tendencies are, and I know what my words are that I tend to use over and over again, and that's a hard thing.
What's the fix on that, Tom? In terms of, if you recognize what it is, whether it's like or so, or all right, Paul, maybe what do you do about that?
The only reason Tom's so good at it, he comes into the classroom. I'm going to say what I tell the kids, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Fair.
It's okay to not say anything. It's okay to pause. And you almost, Tom's big on it. I learned it from it. It's more effective because people, even if they're not paying attention, oh my gosh, the speaker just stopped talking.
Yes, that's correct. Here's the other thing that we tell people, and I think people take this to its extreme. The goal isn't to remove filler words. That's not the goal. In fact, a well-placed, genuinely placed filler word throughout a presentation is very effective. Even if it's a well-placed helps deliver impact, depending on how you do it. So the goal isn't to get rid of them. The goal is to recognize them and be aware of them. That is the only goal.
And use them effectively, or
well, it comes with practice. I was going to say the main answer to your question is practice. You just have to do it over and over and over again, because the more comfortable you become with something, the easier it is to talk about. It's like being comfortable with your content. I always tell people, in fact, I was just at the high school a couple of weeks ago, Paul, and we talked about storytelling and telling your story in front of somebody. And I tried to take away the anxiety with that by saying, listen, you have to say to yourself, there's nobody that knows my story better than I know my story. So all you're doing is talking about something that nobody in the world knows more about than you do. And that's you. And you all know, the more prepared you are, the more familiar you are with content, the more comfortable you are with content, the easier it gets and the more genuine you get. And it's like having a conversation instead of delivering a presentation.
Yeah, you almost would think, and I don't think this is natural, but you almost think it'd be the best story to tell, right? Because to your point, no one knows it better than you, and that in itself should provide some confidence. But we all get, without a lot of practice, we all get a little bit worked up about it.
I'll get sideways on that word presentation. I think anytime that it's teed up like that, I think the more nervous people get. We run different sessions throughout my circles where we just ask you to come and deliver a 3 to 4 minute presentation on anything you want. Anything. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to tell you what you have to talk about. And people get so uptight and so worked up over that until we tell them, now hold on a second. All we're doing is asking you to talk 3 or 4 minutes on a topic that you're an expert on. That's all. People try to reinvent the wheel. They try and think of really cool things to talk about that they think the audience would want to hear, instead of doing the opposite of that, delivering something that you know is genuine and nobody knows more about than you, that you want to communicate to people. And people really get bent out of shape on that. But when we break it down just right to its frame, all you're doing is talking about something that nobody is as familiar with as you are. And that brings the temperature down the room.
You know what I like to do when I have to public speak, or know what I've learned works for me, is I'll have a story of some kind, one or two within what I'm presenting, that I know so well that I know when I get to that, no matter what I've done prior to, I've got this little run in me that I'm so confident in, and I can deliver. Oftentimes, it's maybe a funny anecdote or something like that, right? But something I'm so confident in, even leading up to it, if I'm like, you know, struggling is for lack of a better term, but not feeling as confident. I know when I hit that, I've got a little run in me of pure gold that I know, and that can, bring people back in, and then I'm confident again. And then I can go a few more minutes on whatever, and I know I've got another one coming. And that just gives me like that thing out there that I know when I hit it, I'm good for a minute. I don't even have to think that much.
How easy do things get after that, though?
Yeah, always.
Always. It's almost like you're riding a bicycle downhill after that, because that gets it going. And the analogy that I always use, and Paul, this will, laugh about this. This will bring us back to our softball days. The analogy that I always use, when you show up at softball practice, do they put the ball in the machine and fire it at you 65 miles an hour first, or do you do soft toss first? Which one do you do first? There's a reason you do soft toss first, because that helps you get everything right.
Rhythm,
get in a rhythm, and then you get in the box, and then you hit.
Yeah,
it's no different. When you go on a basketball court, do you camp out outside the 3-point arc and just start firing up threes, or do you do layup lines first?
Right. Yep.
It's no different than that. It's, in fact, let's bring this home. Your day kind of goes better if it starts well, right?
Yep.
It's the same thing. There's no difference. How you start, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, is how you finish.
Yeah. No, and I feel like, public speaking or a presentation, it doesn't even have to be, hundreds of people. It can be 3, right? If you're not familiar with them.
Yeah.
But getting off to that good start is, and it gives the audience, oh, this person knows what. You can see their confidence, you can see their engagement, and it just, like you said, it's like rolling downhill at that point, right? The whole thing starts to work. But I always have that other thing out there that I know I can get to kind of bring me home. It's like when the truck's going down the, those off ramps that they, if their brakes give out, they can pull into for a safe haven. It's kind of like that for me.
Yep. I'm going to give you all the answers to the test. How many times have you heard me say this in your class, Paul? I'm going to give you all the answers to the test. I'm just not going to give them to you right now. I'm going to give them to you at the end. I promise you, by the time you leave here, you'll have everything that you need to be successful during this process. It sets them up. It's almost a hook for later on, right? And if you get started off on the right foot, the audience is yours the rest of the time. It doesn't matter what you do or say after that, because the perception is, and let's face it, I mean, some people say that the only true form of reality is one's perception of it. But the perception is, okay, yeah, you know what? That guy knows what he's talking about. That really, really hits well with me. So that keeps my attention throughout the entire time. So you're right. You're absolutely right. In fact, Paul, I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but I've got something special in order from a storytelling standpoint for you guys when you invite me in, man.
Wait, for school?
Yep.
Yeah, we got to work on that. I'm making a note of that right now. The year's starting to get away from us.
Hey, Tom, you just said something that I've been giving a lot of thought to lately. One of the things that I think I struggle with, I can be good at it, but I'm not good at it consistently. And I don't try to use it as deliberately as I should when I'm talking to anyone. When I'm talking to my employees mainly, I can talk logic, and this is why, but the storytelling aspect, I don't do a good enough job connecting with people who I'm trying to, I don't know if the right word's convince, but I feel like it is. I'm trying to convince them this is this is why we should do it. And I can give them all the processes and some of what I would maybe be the boring stuff, the stuff that matters in my opinion. But I don't connect because I don't think I do a good enough job storytelling with a lot of people. And I just feel like that's a major weakness of mine. And I'm really trying to work on. In fact, I looked up books today on Audible, how to be a better storyteller. I didn't buy any yet because I got distracted. I just remembered.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you say about that? Because the major weakness of
I'm so glad you said that. I guess the question that I would have rhetorically is, well, do you have a structure for the way you tell a story?
no.
And I would make the argument that what people who do have a set structure, almost a default structure for the way that they tell a story, are more effective at it more of the time.
Okay.
Not all the time, but more of the time. An example of that, and I've gone through all of your classes with this, Paul. My default mindset is built around the rule of three. The rule of three is a structured way to tell a story. It's not the only structured way to tell a story. It's a structured way to tell a story. And the rule of three is broken down, no surprise to anybody, into three pillars. The first pillar is it's built around what we've been taught since grade school. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Every story has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Well, when I'm storytelling, I kind of think of it a different way. And it's the same way that you build an elevator pitch. It's the exact same way you build an elevator pitch. What's reality? What's the problem? What's the solution? What is our reality right now? What's the challenge that we're faced with, and how are we going to solve that together? That's a really simple, organized way to approach a conversation with somebody. All right, here's where we are. There's no argument. The facts are the facts, right? Reality is reality. You can't argue with it or anything like that. It is what it is. Okay, so understanding that, what's the biggest challenge that we're faced with right now? And how are we going to work together to solve that problem or solve that challenge? That's the structure of it. The second pillar in the rule of three is less is more. It's not about what you have to say. It's about what you don't have to say. So out of all that stuff I just said, if you sort of have a post-mortem on a conversation, out of all that stuff that I just said, what didn't I need to actually include in that conversation to drive impact? And then the third pillar of the rule of three, it's just simple brain research. It's brain science. You can't remember more than three things that I tell you. It's impossible. The human brain can't do it. It can't do it. So if I know that, we think in patterns, A, B, and C. Just do it. I'm loving it. You name, there are big marketing campaigns. Just ask Phil Knight of Nike, right? The whole Just Do It campaign. There's big marketing campaigns that have been solely built on the mindset and the framework of the rule of three.
Tom, so like a lot of political slogans are built on that. I mean, now that you mentioned,
now that I said that, you're going to go out in the community tomorrow and you're going to notice something that was built the exact same way that we're talking. Like I said, it's a way to do it. It's not the only way, but it's the way that I have found to be the most effective way. So listen, I have people who work for me as well. I use that structure before every single conversation that I have with them. Okay, this is this person's reality. What is the problem that we're facing, and how are we going to solve it together? I think that word together is the most important piece of that, by the way.
Let me follow up with that, because this is one of my challenges in my world, and maybe it is in yours. I kind of hope it is, because I'd love to hear a solution. I've got 35 stores out there, right? And there's some metrics that we track, of course, that are very important to us, and we pay attention to. There's bonus programs built around them, and there's all sorts of importance to it. And there's some people who this impacts, let's say in their bonus program, that doesn't really matter to them. It just doesn't connect with them. Other people, it's a world. Other people, not so. But from a business perspective, I need those numbers met, right? But Tom, if I met with each one of these, people in charge, wow, once it would take me about, with weekends off, let's say, or whatever, just use it. It's gonna take me about 6 weeks just get back to people. If I'm, all my stores are spread out, and so when you say together, that's where sometimes I feel it's so difficult, because I'm going, all right, how are we gonna do this together? Seeing it, okay, great, we got a plan C in 6 weeks, and then it just starts to like, he's gone. Yeah. You follow me?
Yeah. So you're not, anybody that knows me knows that I'm nobody can ever accuse me of being a metrics guy. I can say that. Under that being understood, though, every organization, every business has specific metrics that it has to meet. I think firm understanding and communication of those metrics sets the foundation for all of that stuff. From a business standpoint, these are the non-negotiables. These are the things that we absolutely must achieve. So let's build, using that process over product mindset that we've talked about in the past, let's build a process to make sure that everything that we have to accomplish, those non-negotiables, are accomplished. Now that's easier said than done, right? That takes,
of course,
conversation, that takes, back and forth, that takes feedback, that takes, there's a lot.
Processes, the right processes in our world.
Right, exactly. Yep. But once that is set, and that's sort of the mindset that I use, once that foundation is built, okay, we have a process that is almost going to ensure that we achieve what we have to achieve by accident because of our process.
Correct.
Now we can focus on the individual. So let's come together. Here's what all of us have to achieve. They're just non-negotiables. I'm held accountable for all of this stuff. We're all held accountable for this stuff together. Now let's talk about what's going to get each individual to where they want to get based on what their definition of success is, right? Because it's going to be different for everybody. Sure. But I do believe that where some lose their way, it's with that first part of that process. Do you truly understand what expectations are? Do you understand what it is we have to achieve as a business? Because if you do, and you have a good conversation around that, I think the sky's the limit. I really do. But they have to understand what your expectations are. These are the non-negotiables that we're not going to talk about. Now let's talk about how we're going to be successful as a business unit, as an organization, as a store, as an individual. But I think that first part of it is key, because that's young people aren't going to get this reference out there, but some people try and jump the shark, right? They really try and skip. They skip the hard part of the process. And once that skip, it's tough to go back to that, right? If they don't understand what expectations are, it's really, really tough to have a productive long-term conversation with people. But it is truly that process over product mentality that I use all the time. If we build the right process, the results are going to be achieved almost by accident. If that doesn't happen, then we got to fix our process.
Fix the process, right? Yeah. No, it's definitely one of the challenges in our world. I'm not alone in it. I know that because I communicate with so many others who live in a similar environment in terms of my business, and we have a lot of really good processes, because that's what franchises are. They're just following processes, right? Sure. And they're super important to hit some of these metrics in our world, but it's I think where maybe we need to do a better job is make sure that they truly understand those expectations, like you said, and some of those non-negotiables. And like you said, these things we're all held accountable for, even though we could say, well, it's your meaning my business. But it impacts my life in a very major way, as you can probably imagine, whether we hit some of those, meet those metrics or not. So
but you know what, man, I would argue that if it's approached the right way, you achieve something that goes far beyond accountability. I always tell my folks, listen, I don't expect accountability. That word is so overused now. Accountability it's almost assumed to come with a stick to it. You know what I mean? It sounds almost confrontational. If you do this the right way, you'll achieve ownership, because ownership is what you want. You want the individual to own that process. I always tell folks, if I ask you to be accountable for something, you will do it, but you'll do it because I asked you to do it.
Right.
If you own it, you'll do it because it's the right thing to do, and I'll never have to ask you.
Tom, it's always the employees. My wife and I would say, it's like they own that store, right?
Yeah.
They act. You're 100% right. Though the results there versus and I'm always frustrated in our world, because I feel like in so many cases it's like, you've got the carrot or the stick, and everything is set up for stick, and I hate that. I hate it. It first of all, it's not effective long term. It's got all sorts of other downsides to it, and so even if you're one of those people, which I'm not, who just loves that stick, it's got its limitations and it's got its disadvantages. But that ownership is where that's a sweet spot, and no question about it. And it's I've found, and that getting to that ownership, I guess, is where the real question is, that getting people who have that ownership, in my experience, they're not there because you gave them an extra X amount an hour, or because because you used a stick, or it's never those things. That's not how you create it. That said, if I knew how to create it, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Well, the bridge between both of those two, this is an interesting conversation, because if I said, Paul, I'm going to hold you accountable for something, it almost sounds like I'm going to be looking for something wrong every step of the way. I'm going to be waiting for you to do something wrong, as opposed to working with you and creating ownership, where I'm empowering you to own a process. But I think the bridge between those two things is caring.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bridge between those two things. It's if people see that you genuinely care about them, because if you don't genuinely care about them, they'll see right through it.
Yeah.
You're not kidding anybody.
No.
If they really see that you genuinely care, I have to tell you, there's a good chance that accountability turns into ownership all by itself.
Yeah.
Without you having to do anything about it. So do you really care about the people who are sort of in your charge?
Yeah.
That's the question. That's ultimately the question. It's funny how all this comes back to communication, isn't it? Isn't it weird how that happens?
Yeah, I shouldn't have said earlier I don't like the way my voice sounds, because I haven't heard it in 30 minutes. I'm joking.
There you go.
No, listen, I wasn't stopping you guys. What I like about, that's why I love doing
Good one,
this.
Paul.
Well, yeah, I'm joking, but that's why I've got a ton of notes. My mind's been racing, and basically you two just made me feel good about what I've been trying to change with the culture of the softball team I coach now. Mm-hmm. I have a quote that I tell them all the time, that how you do anything is how you do everything. So,
man, that's
it's like, and there's a couple things. We have open gyms, and they're like, do we have to wear softball pants? I'm like, are we playing a softball game? Like, wear sweatpants. We're inside a gym, we don't just field ground balls in the gym. I have a Google Doc, and the kids sign up for 40-minute increments in groups of 5, and they hit and get out of there. They're busy. Like I it drives me nuts when kids go 100 different directions, or they're studying or caring for an aunt or uncle or whatever, and they can't make a 2-hour open gym. And now, oh, you're not dedicated. I'm going to hold you accountable. They say that all the time. No, they're busy. But if you give them 40 minutes and they can pick the time slot in between 2.5, 3 hours, they
That's
show
cool.
up, they go, it overlaps a little. Now we've got more 1-on-1 or 3-on-5. And they're welcome to stay, and there's some agility drills they can work on. Pitchers and catchers, of course, sometimes stay and go over to the side, but they feel more empowered. They feel more into it, and they feel like, I keep saying, we're going to be efficient. It's quality over quantity. And I've had to lengthen the open gyms, which stinks for me, but we've had so many people coming.
That's great.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do that's why I love listening to what you guys were saying. I mean, I don't run that type of business or have people under me, but in a sense I do.
Same thing. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
There's no difference.
And why don't people commit to school sports or a company or an employer, right? It's
Right.
all the same stuff. And
Yep.
buying in, you want them to feel like they're part of it. And there's no guarantees. We all know that, right? That's why I love that Detroit Lions coach, and everybody's bashing him today because he went with his metrics.
Yeah.
But I love his process. He's going to be successful.
Yeah, I agree. You know what? Culture happens whether you want it to or not.
Yeah.
I think that gets lost sometimes, and I tell that to the kids. Every time I'm in front of them, I was just, Paul, Rick Kriska.
Yep.
He's been kind enough to partner with me, or bring me in, and we've sort of built this series of presentations or sessions with the seniors, and we talk about that all the time. Culture happens whether you want it to or not, but you're the one that builds the culture. You're the one that builds your own culture. And one thing that we always talk about is, and this goes back to your quote, Paul, how you do something is how you do everything. If that's the mindset of a leader, I think it's incumbent upon the leader to communicate that to the people who are in their charge. Because that right there, that foundation of expectation that we talked about, that's what helped build that foundation of expectation. And what they don't realize, and this is the point that I really tried to get across to them, throughout life, whether it's a boss or a coach or someone who is in charge of them, so to speak, really, really important decisions are going to be made about them when they're not in the room. I mean, think about that. I mean, Paul, you don't bring your entire team in a room and figure out who's going to play second base together.
No.
You do that in their absence. Think about that. I mean, really important decisions that are going to be made about people in life, whether or not you get a promotion, whether or not you get a pay raise, what your evaluation is going to be for that year, whatever it is that you're talking about. Really, really important decisions are going to be made about you when you're not there. So here's the question. Who's going to carry your paperwork? That's the question that I always ask them. Who's going to carry your paperwork into that room that you're not in and speak on your behalf when you're not there? It really, I mean, that's sort of a jaw dropper, because that kind of gets people thinking. And the thing that I always ask them is, okay, right now, right this second, what is somebody else in another room saying about you? What do they say when you're not in the room? What do they say about you when you're not in the room? And this goes back to the culture that you're building with your softball team. This goes back to the culture that Matt, that you're building with your employees. It's the same thing.
You know, to piggyback that, because I've been thinking of it in my head. I learned this from my younger daughter, Allie, because she's doing a lot of coaching out in Chicago.
Good for her, man.
Thank you. She asks girls all the time, so what'd you think about that drill, or thoughts on what we did today? And there used to be dead silence. And what do most coaches do, or most bosses do, when there's dead silence? You fill it with your opinion.
Yeah.
So the first couple times she looked at him and just goes, "Okay, I'll wait. I've got time." And she said it felt like 10 minutes till someone finally said something. But there was no culture of the kids knew on that team that nobody really cared what they thought. Hey, any questions? Okay, hey, we had a great practice today. Let's go. So I walk around in those smaller groups now, and they're working on a drill. I don't say a word sometimes at all until I finally say, "What are your thoughts right now?" I want to hear what they're thinking about the swing. Now, I'll be making important decisions with them, won't I? But I'll know if they're working, like what their thought process is and what they're doing. And the pitchers were there last Saturday, and we have a new varsity assistant coach, and I'm like, "So what'd you think? What'd you think about what she told you today?" And sometimes I'll say, "She's still the coach. I mean, but what's your problem?" Like, I need to know your feedback. And I don't think we as leaders do that enough.
I can't argue with that. You're exactly right. In fact, another way to think about that, and this goes back to that accountability versus ownership. You know,
Hey, I got to say something quick before you go.
Yeah.
Do you think so many people have been burnt by, "Oh, I want your feedback," and then it's used against them later?
I was just about ready to say that. So,
okay.
So that's a great segue, because
Sorry.
For me anyway, it's the same mentality. You know, what connotation does the word accountability have versus the word ownership? Well, it's the same with feedback. It's the same with feedback. In fact, there's a lot of good research out there. In fact, you'll love this, Paul. I think I heard this from Adam Grant. In fact, I think there's some research out there that, you know, instead of asking for feedback, ask for advice. Instead of saying, "Hey, what feedback do you have for me?" Say, what advice would you give me to get better? Because I think the same dynamic exists there, because feedback is almost like, "Hey, give me your feedback, and then I'm going to start to shield myself because I know you're going to tell me all the things that I'm doing wrong."
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to, "Hey, can you give me some advice?"
Which is open, right? Opens you right up.
And it's a more positive thing. It's a more positive feeling. Yet I just changed one word.
Yeah.
That's all I did. And I've really started to incorporate that with my folks and the people who I work with all the time. Instead of me, I don't ask for feedback anymore. I now ask for advice, because it makes more people have to get you better. All right, now I'm going to get you better.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, Paul. I'm telling you, just what you just said. I think feedback can be a rough word for folks.
Does it take people a while to believe that? Because I don't think, you know, last year being my first year with that team, I don't think many of them bought in, because you're not used to that. This year's I've had all off season. This year it's different. Haven't changed, you know.
But I think the big piece of that, and this is you and I have talked about this a lot. And my guess, not being anywhere near the place, but my guess is the culture is shifted now because you've given them your trust. Right? We've talked about that all the time. There's this big question out there: is trust something that should be earned, or is it something that should be given?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have a different thought on that. I think trust is something that should be given. Because if I say, "Okay, you know what? Okay, Matt, you have to go out and earn my trust." Well, first of all, how do I know when you've done that? But more importantly, how do you know when you've earned my trust? I mean, do you just wake up one day and say, "Hey, guess what? You've done a great job. Now you've earned my trust." That's
trust meter, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, give away your trust, and I guarantee you, if you decide to give away your trust, you will be you will be pleasantly surprised more often than you won't be.
Hmm.
And I think, Paul, my guess is, knowing you the way that I know you, my guess is that that's the foundation of it all, because I used to believe that trust was the foundation for everything. But and I mean, Brene Brown would be proud to hear about this, but trust used to be the foundation. It's not. It's actually vulnerability.
I believe that.
But you can't be vulnerable unless you've built a psychologically safe environment. So if you're looking at this in layers, everybody wants connectivity, right? We're human beings. We're built for connection. Everybody wants connectivity, but you can't have connectivity. Connectivity is the top layer of the process. The bottom layer is psychological safety. The next layer, if you have a psychologically safe environment, people will be more apt to be more vulnerable. Vulnerability builds trust, and trust builds connection. Trust results in connection. So that's sort of the big four. That's kind of how I've teed it up for my group, and how I've sort of used that as a default mindset for me. So it's, again, do you have a purposeful way for the way you approach conversations with all people around you? And if you do, I mean, it's not always going to work out, but it will most of the time. That's for sure.
Yeah, you have to be willing. I mean, with employees, colleagues, co-owners, you have to be willing to know when you've got to cut ties too. Some people just aren't going to buy in, right?
It's the way it is, man. I mean, it's you can't make somebody do something. You can't make somebody buy in. You can't make somebody trust you. You can't. You just can't do it. It's not gonna work out for everybody. But it's just like what you talked about with Dan Campbell. That's his process. That's the way he's always coached. It's a default mindset for him. Well, it's the same in the business world. I believe that if you truly take that process over product mentality, and you have a default mindset around not only the way you tell your stories, about the way you build your culture, the way you build your environment, and stick to it, I mean, you're gonna do okay. You're gonna do all right. So that's just my thought around it all. It's harder to implement sometimes, of course.
Right. Matt, I want to you talk about, actually now I'm asking Matt a question and not Tom.
Yeah.
I don't know how that
Hey,
happened.
I'll be the moderator for this podcast.
Absolutely. You could be. You talked about metrics. Wait, what was it? Incentives earlier that your franchise has, obviously. What do you do when people don't buy in, or is that the $1 million question? Because you said some don't.
No, it is $1 million question. And if some don't, you kind of, what Tom was just saying, and using the Dan Campbell example, like, this is what has to be done. These are the non-negotiables. We need to hit these numbers, because if the business isn't healthy, then the whole thing's in trouble, and so now there's some variables in what metrics we're talking about, and is it monthly, is it quarterly, is it annually? There's some variables there, but there are certainly people that don't buy in, and you have to replace people, and that's just, it's kind of like, yeah, those things are going to happen, and I don't like it, but it has to happen. The question is, so often, okay, where's the effort? Do I trust the effort, right? Look, you're not going to hit every number every time, and it isn't like, oh, you didn't hit it this month, goodbye. You didn't hit it next month, goodbye. It's
Right.
not like that. There's some subjectivity to it, I guess, in a sense, and there's some Tom, I'm like you. I always start from a place of trust and respect with people. I don't demand they earn it. I give it from the beginning, and then you can take it away through actions. But I start there, and I've just always felt that you have a much more well thought out and spoken way of putting it. But as you're talking, I'm like, yes, there's this vulnerability here, and then we can build into something together, and it just seems to work better that way rather than you're going to earn my trust or else. I've never really had any success with that mentality.
You know what though? You got me thinking about something, Paul. You really what we're talking about. I mean, forget getting rid of people and all that stuff. Really, what we're talking about is top performers versus lower performers, right? That's really what we're talking about. And the thing that I always tell folks, whether you realize it or not, everywhere you go, in every facet of business, it doesn't matter where it is, everybody's got a bell-shaped curve.
Yep.
Everybody's got a bell-shaped curve. Hey, Paul, there's a bell-shaped curve in teaching. Matt, there's a bell-shaped curve on your team. There's a bell-shaped curve on mine. There's a bell-shaped curve everywhere. And the reason, this is the reason I bring this up. When I first became a people leader, I'll never forget the first person I worked for. He always called me by my last name. And he said, Casey, I got a question for you. I want you to answer it for me right now. You got a team of 12 people. Okay. You've got two people on the, you got a bell-shaped curve. You have two people on this side of the curve. You got two people on this side of the curve, and you got 8 people in the middle of that curve, which seems realistic, right? I mean, that's a typical bell-shaped curve.
Yeah.
He said, I got a question for you. Forget about the people in the middle. Think about the two people on the opposite ends of that spectrum. Who are you spending your most time with? And I said, like I knew what the heck I was talking about, I said, got it. You know what? These people need development. These people
need to coach them, right? Yeah.
I can give them, I got to coach them up to make them better. And he looked me dead in the eye and he said, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. You have to spend most of your time with the people on the right side of that, your top performers who are on the right side of that bell-shaped curve, because the goal is to have them pull the curve to the right, as opposed to what you're trying to do. You expect those people on the other side of the curve to push the bell-shaped curve to the right, because because this is what happens. Now, know where a bell-shaped curve sits. You pull that bell-shaped curve to the right, your better people get even better. Most of your people in the middle shift toward the right side of that bell-shaped curve. And where do the people on the back end of that bell-shaped curve shift? They shift to the middle of that bell-shaped curve. So now by pulling that bell-shaped curve to the right, you just because of their influence, you have influenced your entire team and you've made them all better at the same time. That's not how most people think. No. That's not how most people think, because where's your energy going to go? Where's your time going to go? That's the question that you have to ask yourself.
It is the question. It is the question. That's a question I always have to ask.
Right. And I mean, some would say there's pretty good research. You know what? Work with your very best people to pull the entire organization to the right.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never given that any thought. I've never heard that from that sense.
My daughters had a really good coach at a young age that said, I'm getting on you because I love you. If I'm not talking to you at all, you probably won't be on the team next year. That's just what it is. But
I tell my people,
laughing,
I love you like family.
But that's what he was doing. I don't have time to talk to the people that aren't putting in effort or aren't coachable or shouldn't be. You know, it's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, it's leadership, right? There's no one book to read to learn how to become a good leader, right?
Unfortunately,
listen. If you, this is the thing that I always tell people. If everything you do is coming from a place of kindness, if you end up stepping on people's toes along the way, turn around and apologize to them, because you've got nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
And that's the approach that I've decided to take. I mean, maybe it's because I've been doing what I do for a really long time, and And that's the way it goes. I'm reading this book. It's funny, Paul, I'll close with this because I got it. And I'm not going to say chop wood, carry water, although I just said it. I'm not going to say that. Don't worry. I just got.
I read that, by the way, since the last time. So
yeah, hey, great book.
Yes.
The only thing better than reading a good book is reading it again. That's what I always tell. That's what I always tell people.
Just did that. I just re-listened to the Art of War by Stephen Pressfield.
Great.
And that's the third time. And Matt just listened to it. Same thing. But anyways, go ahead.
I just re-listened to a book by Elizabeth Gilbert, I think her name is. It's called Big Magic. Called Big Magic. And there's all sorts of really cool stuff in that book. I mean, it's great. I mean, martyrs versus tricksters. Oh man, it's really, really cool. You guys will really, really love it.
Just wrote it down.
What was it called?
Big Magic. Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I'm sorry, Elizabeth Gilbert is her name. And there's a section in there where she talks about phases of life. You know, we spend our 20s and our 30s trying to validate ourselves and trying to impress people and trying to prove to people that we actually deserve to be in a room.
Mm-hmm.
And then we spend our 40s and 50s, and that's sort of where we are, right? So we're in that middle phase, the three of us, where, you know what, you've gotten to a point where you're comfortable in your own skin, and frankly, you don't really care what other people think. I mean,
it's a great place to be.
but in a weird kind of way, not caring is actually caring, right? I mean, it's just, again, we're all doing things. We're all trying to do the right thing. I don't really care what anybody thinks of me. It doesn't make any difference. As long as I keep trying to do the right thing and it's coming from a genuine place and a place of kindness.
Right.
Look, you don't like what I'm doing? Cool.
That's on you at that point.
Wonderful.
And people really don't think about you as much as you think they do.
Aha.
Yeah.
That's the third phase.
Oh, jeez.
That's the third phase. You see, we get to our 60s and our 70s, and we finally realize nobody was thinking about us in the first place.
Somehow I was there in my 20s. I always knew
that's fair. That's fair. Fair.
Which had its good and bad.
Right. But it just gives you, you go through different mindsets throughout your entire life. And
you do.
And I would argue, and I've always sort of drawn my line in the sand, that what are we going to do? It's our responsibility to help those people that are approaching their 20s and their 30s to be as prepared for whatever it is they're going to be faced with when they get out in the real world. And I will deliver this shot, because everybody who I work with in the school districts around us right now, they all probably punch me in my face for saying this, because I say it about 100 times. Communication skills are everything. And the question that I think we have to ask ourselves is, are we really helping prepare our kids from a communication skill standpoint? And I don't know if the answer to that is yes. I think there's a lot more discussion that probably needs to be had around that, because we talked about the communication pandemic in a couple of the episodes that we talked about, and I don't think that's gone away. I really don't think that's gone away. So,
No, Tom, if you want a anecdotal opinion on that, which would be from me, we're in a real difficult spot. It's the answer is no. It's just unequivocally no, in my opinion. It's like everything, it comes with consequences.
That's right. And I do believe there's something. Listen, how about this? I refuse to believe that there's nothing we can do about it. I just absolutely refuse. I refuse to believe that. Yep. And I think it begins at the high school level. I really do. And there's all sorts of really cool, innovative, unique conversations that can be had around that for the people that want to have the conversations.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity. There really is. That's the good news for me anyway. There's a real opportunity to help folks be even more prepared than they already are when they leave high school. So just my 2 cents.
Oh, we like your 2 cents.
Thanks for the invite. This is fun,
Well,
man. I can do this all the time.
Well, I know you.
That's why we got started doing it, right, Paul?
Yeah,
Great.
exactly. And you're one of the select few. Like, we should have you on more often, and then we've been booked with a lot of people, and it's a good and a bad thing, because you don't revisit some. But
I know, man. I kept saying to myself, my freaking phone must be broke or something. What the hell's wrong with it, man? I usually hear from Paul right around now.
I was out of minutes.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Hey, listen, y'all are doing great stuff. This is awesome. It's just this has kind of just turned into its thing. It's kind of running itself at this point.
Yes, and this is a tough one. I think I narrowed it down what we're going to call it. I'll send it to you when I decide.
Okay.
But
okay, do whatever you want to do with it. Post it wherever you want to post it, and I hope people found some value. Anyway, I hope I brought something to the table.
Yeah, I did.
I found value. Yeah, but and that's why we do it. We keep saying, if we're going to have guests on and if we're not going to get anything out of it, then it doesn't even matter if other people do. What's the point?
Hey, listen, I'm no Cam F awesome, but I got something to contribute.
You know what? If you're on enough, we'll start quoting you to other guests, and they'll be like, who?
That's true.
But you drop and you're consistent with your core things, and we didn't even have a topic tonight. I told you we were going to freestyle.
That's the best kind of podcast, man. That's the best kind of podcast.
And we just went an hour, so
like that.
Good
Thanks,
stuff.
guys.
Paul, I expect a phone call, man. I expect a text with a time that works for you guys over there, man.
I wrote it down. I'm going to talk to them about it tomorrow.
Perfect.
See you guys.
See you. Have a good night, guys.